George, Paul, and Ringo haven't cut a record together in years, but that doesn't mean Beatlemania is dead. As a matter of fact, it's alive and well in a reincarnated form. Bob Wallace has the story.
It is not John, Paul, George, and Ringo, but Justin, Mitch, Leslie, and Joe, the stars of Beatlemania, opening this weekend at the Blackstone. Now that we've had our fill of 50s nostalgia, 60s nostalgia is upon us. The producers of this show recruited Justin McNeil, Mitch Weissman, Leslie Fradkin, and Joe Pecorino from hundreds of young musicians during auditions in New York and shut them away for months of rehearsal until they captured the Beatles' sound. Although the show includes 29 songs performed by the surrogate Beatles, it is more than just music. It traces the Beatles' career and the times that influenced them from their early days to the 70s, with all types of multimedia visual effects going on to illustrate the events of the day. The drug scene, the Vietnam War, flower power, and the Democratic Convention of 1968. Three of the performers don't really look much like the Beatles they play in the show. Mitch Weissman is a dead ringer for Paul McCartney. And when he sits on the edge of the stage and does Yesterday, it's like a trip back in time.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now I'm not so far here to stay.
Ringo has come out in the press and not really wholeheartedly been with the show. And as a matter of fact, he doesn't like it one bit. The others have said things through a variety of attorneys and wives, and it's pretty mixed. I can't say that I wholeheartedly blame them. And I think that if they came to see the show, because none of them have, as far as we know, that they would be impressed and they might give it its blessing.
We keep hearing talk of a Beatles reunion, but so far it's only that, talk. Until the real thing comes along again, we'll have Beatlemania to remind us all of how it used to be. The Blackstone Theater, Bob Wallace, Channel 2 News.
But Tender Chunks
will be opening tomorrow night at the Blackstone Theater. It's Beatlemania, a live media musical celebration of the Beatles and the 1960s era they helped shape. The light and sound extravaganza features film and video pictures on flying scrims and a rear screen, special effects, and 29 songs performed by 4 surrogate Beatles who look and sound like the real thing.
A live musical celebration of the Beatles and the era they helped shape. Sylvia Cisneros has it.
Even so, legends never die. They are marketed and packaged to live forever. Beatlemania is no exception. It, too, has been immortalized as a Broadway multimedia musical. Murray the K, a New York rock DJ during the 60s, was partly responsible for the selling of Beatlemania the first time around. And as it comes around again, so does Murray. He says the musical puts the Beatle phenomenon in perspective.
The fact that they changed with every album 180 degrees, and while Sinatra and Goodman and Presley stayed the same from the beginning to the end of their careers, the Beatles changed 180 degrees with every album. They grew right in front of our eyes. I mean, we grew up with them. They changed like we changed. They changed their hairstyle. They changed their attitude. And it all happened right in front of us. And that was keeping with the times when things were exploding in the 60s. It's a kind of a show where you laugh a lot, and believe it or not, there are times that you cry.
For the performers, their satisfaction comes from not only recreating the past perfectly, but creating a present that's better than make-believe.
It's good turning the young kids onto it, though. Yeah. You know, the young kids are, you know, no offense, guys, but we are helping you sell some records. Not that you need it. That's right. You know. I mean, we're not really getting that much out of it in your record. No, really, it's great to know that, you know, they're still the hottest band ever.
The Beatles innovated the 60s, and the success of Beatlemania may very well innovate Broadway. Sylvia Cisneros, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Welcome back, Cotter, and Mary Hartman, her younger sister, Debralee Scott. Charlie?
All of that and more next on AM Chicago. Stay with us.
Well, at the top of the show, we gave you a glimpse of Beatlemania. It's the multimedia sound and light entertainment extravaganza, which opened at the Blackstone Theater last Saturday. I saw it Wednesday night, and I enjoyed it so much. I'm sure you will. Take a look at this right now. We're going to meet two of the guests in just a moment. But first, let's take another look at the Fab Four.
Post voice.
Well, that was a very quick look, because we don't want to give too much of it away. Right. So let me introduce you to our guest this morning. First, Mitch Weissman. And when you take a look at Mitch Weissman, you will understand why he is in a show entitled Beatlemania.
And you can tell me later.
An amazing resemblance to the fellow who used to play the bass guitar with the Beatles by the name of Paul McCartney, and Joe Pecorino, who plays rhythm guitar, of course, the one John Lennon. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I enjoyed you so much the other night. The show was just terrific. I don't know what I expected when I went in.
Well, a lot of people don't, you know.
Sometimes we won that.
You know,
you're not always sure what's going to happen either.
Yeah, changes.
So you've just opened last Saturday night, and you were telling me before we went on the air that you're still working out some of the sound things because they're a bit different.
Yeah, we're basically, when you come into a new town, it's all new equipment, and you're always trying to upgrade, and sometimes it doesn't go that way. So the overall, you know, obviously it doesn't show that much on the audience because we're used to a certain sound quality. It's just not what we want it yet.
Now, the show opened on Broadway, but let's go back even before that time, when the ad first appeared in the Village Voice, looking for people, looking for musicians and actors who could create the sound of the Beatles. What happened when you first saw it, Mitch?
I never saw it. Someone called me on the telephone and said that there's this ad. They want the Beatles, you know, sound alike singers, writers for unique opportunity, I guess it was called. I can't remember. And I said, I'm not going. I was scared to death. I didn't want to go at all. But someone went with me, and I made an arrangement for an audition and went down. And it was, they had the later auditions were more or less cattle call, but the individual ones that Joey and I went to were just that. They were individual, separate time slots. And so it was even more frightening. There was no one there to be with you to wonder, I mean, what are we here for? So it was very nerve-wracking. Just one person in the room say, okay, sing this, okay, we'll call you. So
that's a little self-conscious time at that point.
Very much.
What did you sing?
I sang about 5 bars of Yesterday and about 5 bars of Get Back. And they said, don't go anyplace for the next 5 days. And I went, well, okay. So that was about it.
Joe, what about you?
Well, I went in expecting to see a lot of Beatles. You know, that's basically the reason I answered the ad, because I thought it would be funny seeing, you know, a whole flock of musicians looking like different era Beatles, you know, like Ringo 68 and John 69 and things like that. I walked in and I was really disappointed because it was just me, and I went, oh, come on, you know, I came down here and I spent the cab fare. Let me see some people who look like them. The hell of it, you know. So, and I auditioned for McCartney when I went down. So I sang a couple of McCartney tunes originally. And so they said, okay, come back 2 days, and then the next couple of days there was about
40, 50 musicians down there, and I wasn't wearing my glasses at the time, you know, and I saw Mitch. I've told this story countless times because it was so funny to me at that time, and I was sitting on the couch in the rehearsal hall waiting to go up, you know, with all these other people.
I remember that.
And, you know, Mitch was about 30 feet away from me, and I'm blind as Lennon is anyway, without my glasses, and I looked up and I said, wait a minute, what's McCartney doing here? You know, I actually thought, but now he looks like Mitch to me anyway.
That's right.
I think. Anyway.
Did you think at that point, I hope McCartney thinks I sound like him, so I get the part?
Sure. So they just mixed and matched a whole bunch of musicians, you know, and it ended up that the four of us, the other two, who?
That's right.
The other two fellows who are under the
Leslie
chairs
and
right now.
Justin, they're not sleep, they sleep late.
That's right.
Leslie and Justin. Now, when you auditioned for this, did it take just five days from the time you first auditioned till you knew you had the job?
No. We didn't know. We only found out about 3 months ago, really.
We've been doing this on the sly.
We went to do the final callbacks, or actually that Friday when we first came in. It was a week later, and they asked me to come, and I couldn't even make it, but I managed to squeeze it. I had prior commitments for that day. We all came down, and we all started to go through an elimination process that lasted about 3-4 days. And then even after that was over, we finally met the producers at the time. Steve Lieber came down, and we went, oh, well, we know who you are, but what's this all about? And he still wouldn't tell us. So we rehearsed about 2 weeks.
So you had no idea what you were auditioning for,
We
really?
thought we were going to become the next great Beatle bar band.
Yeah, at that particular time, they probably didn't know what we were doing either, because they had a concept, but from what their original concept is to what we have now is totally different. Yeah, the show started off as a totally different idea than what it evolved into.
All right, there were, what, over 2,000 people who auditioned for this?
Overall. The people who didn't make it were shot.
Right, exactly.
Exterminated, gotten rid of. So now you know you had the part. What happened then? Didn't you have to go through, I mean, because you really have recreated that sound.
We tried.
And you have. You've mastered it.
That's good.
How long did it take to do that?
10 months.
Before you opened?
Well, the thing was the show was supposed to open at the first point. You know, see, when we started rehearsing in July '76. Yeah. And the show was supposed to open in September, and when it came to September, and
they said October.
October, and then they said
October, and guess.
So all this time we were rehearsing in, you know, an unlimited amount of songs. You know, we learned from 250 to 300 songs, because no one knew what was going on. No one knew what the final songs were going to be, and. As it got closer and closer to the show opening, they narrowed it down to 70 songs.
Only 70?
Only 70.
Yeah, right.
And then 60.
I went,
you know. And,
I know some of the releases ever, there was 34 songs, then 29. Why don't we take a look at one of the songs right now from Beatlemania? No, we'll take a commercial first.
Okay,
We'll leave you all hanging.
Take 5.
And you'll get to see part of Beatlemania when we come back, right after this message.
Word from local style.
Seems so far away. Now it looks as though we're here to stay. Oh, I believe yesterday so late. I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. Oh, yesterday.
Well, we are back, and you did get to see part of the Beatlemania film as we were going out of that last segment. Now I would like you to meet Debralee Scott, known to all of you as Kathy Shumway on Mary Hartman, Mary Hartman. And you did get to see part of the Beatlemania film as we were going out of that last segment. Now I would like you to meet Debralee Scott, known to all of you as Kathy Shumway on Mary Hartman, Mary Hartman, and from Welcome Back, Kotter. She's joined us along with Mitch Weissman, who is bass guitarist in Beatlemania, Paul McCartney, and Joe Pecorino, rhythm guitar, John Lennon, known to all of us who have seen Beatlemania. Welcome. I have to tell a funny little story that happened right after I saw Beatlemania on Wednesday night. Oh. Coming out of the theater, all of a sudden I see this cab full of balloons. Yes. And I can barely see that there are 2 women in the cab also. Right. All right. Tons of balloons, every size, shape, the whole thing. And I take a closer look because I normally don't see balloons in cabs like that. There is Debralee Scott trying to get the balloons out of the cab. Right. What in the world were you doing?
Well, Mitch's wife, Tony, and we had dinner, and Joey here mentioned that he wanted some helium balloons. So we got the idea that we'd buy him some helium balloons. Unfortunately, I always go to excess, and I bought 15 helium balloons and stuffed them, and we both stuffed them in this cab and then proceeded to bring them to the theater and get them up the stairs. It was quite fun.
And you happened to arrive just at the point when the show was
everybody was letting out. It was so embarrassing, and all these people going, you know, and screaming, and we're with these huge balloons, just tons of them.
We get this knock on the door.
Oh, yes.
In the dressing room, and say, "Get out of here, go away, go away." And they say, "You have to open the door." We open the door, and I see these
Tony and I just pushed these
start
balloons
coming
into the room, and they just filled the whole dressing room.
More and more and more. The whole dressing room filled up with balloons, and Joe and I are just laughing.
Well, now, we should mention that, Debralee, you are dating Joe.
Yes.
And this is why you bring him balloons. You don't do this for every act that's appearing in Chicago.
That's true, no.
Eat your heart out, Sammy.
One of the funny things was, she's trying to pay the cab driver, and I happen to recognize her, so I go over and I'm going, "Excuse me, yes, I'm with AM Chicago," and she's going, "What? Let me pay this man off and get out of here."
I'm trying to get the balloons, and they were all over the place, and I'm trying to hold on. Oh, it was hysterical.
Now, the only reason you're in Chicago, is that because you're visiting Joe?
Yes. Yep. I'm not working here.
So nice.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Yes, that's right. Well, I'm in here now doing this show, too.
Well, and we're thrilled to have you. You know, the greatest thing I remember about you, and it's certainly not the greatest thing that you have done, but one of my nicest moments with you.
I remember.
You remember?
The Emmys.
At the Emmys. Because
yep, it was the first time you won.
This lovely woman handed me the Emmy, and I will never forget that.
Yeah, that was really thrilling, because wasn't that when the show first started or something?
Right, we hadn't been on the air all that long, and we were
really
surprised.
I was so excited for you. I was jumping up and down, and Bruce Solomon from Mary Hartman, who played Sergeant Foley, knew Steve.
They had been friends in college.
Right, right.
Years and years ago.
Right. That was great. That was the first time I ever came to Chicago, too. And I love this town. It's great. I've been back many times.
What are you going to be doing now? I mean, I know you're visiting now and you're taking a little time off, but what's next?
Well, I finished a film, which I did in Maui, Hawaii, which was not too shabby, right?
That's sort of a tough
6
job.
weeks, yeah. It was very difficult there, with Bobby Hedges from Welcome Back, Kotter, and Lisa Hartman from Tabitha, and Ricky Martin, Dean Martin's younger son, and Danny Lockhart, who is June Lockhart's daughter, and June Lockhart, who played my mother. It was sort of a family film. And we were all over there in Hawaii for 6 weeks playing around.
And what's it about? Life in a metropolitan city?
Yeah, yeah. We decided we'd go there to film, you know, sort of, no, it's 4 kids who fall in love on the beach, sort of an updated beach blanket bingo kind of thing. And, but it was fun. It was fun doing that. And that should be out sometime, probably before the end of the summer.
You know, realizing all of the people who go crazy, or who did go crazy over the Beatles, and now are going crazy over you fellas, really. I mean, I saw the reaction of the people in the audience. There are teenagers, 13, 14 years old, who are standing up and screaming. Mm-hmm. You know, they get very excited. Does this create, do you have groupies that follow you? Debralee seems to know the answer to that one.
Yeah, it's funny. We're getting a whole sort of audience of people who are turned on to us because we are representing the Beatles to them, and also, you know, we get a lot of fan mail.
And because they're cute.
Saying, you know, wow, you guys are better than them, you know, which I think is ridiculous. Nobody can be better than them, but, you know, it's nice to know that we mean that much on a different level.
Well, reading in the paper the other day, I believe it was in Cup's column, where it mentioned that a young woman tried to climb into Leslie's
Leslie, yeah, he plays
room.
George. Leslie, hi, Liz.
Leslie Fradkin?
Yes, yeah, he plays George. Yeah, I guess I've only found that out when I read it myself, to tell you the truth.
Leslie doesn't tell you guys
We don't
much.
talk that. No, we do, really. We didn't find that out.
What are some of the little incidents that you've been involved in that you've had to get out of because of that sort of thing?
Oh, you got a few.
Ooh.
I bet Mitch does have a few.
Well, we've
only been here a little while, so we don't have.
Yeah, here it hasn't been that much here. I mean, we haven't been in town long enough.
Wait till tomorrow.
I guess, but yeah, wait till tomorrow. All right, very, very good. In New York, Joe and I were once chased down the street on the way to the Winter Garden. There was no way we could have stopped and explained our way that we weren't, or I wasn't, whatever the attraction was at the time. We had to run and just run and run through an amazing crowd at the stage door too. And I don't know how we got into the theater. But before the show even started, Joe and I used to go to concerts, and as he said once before, it's very, very handy getting in.
Yeah, it really helps.
Getting out is a real pain. I've had to sign autographs, pretend, whatever it was. Just because you meet a lot of people who want to believe it, and they don't. If you say you're not, they don't want to believe you.
I know that because it is amazing how much you do look like a young Paul McCartney.
You know, one of the funniest things about the whole the show is done, realizing the impact the Beatles had really is when we did shows where they were predominantly like, you know, group sales and kids and high school kids, and it was very loud, lots of screaming. You realize the extent of what they went through, you know, on a smaller level. You know, playing for 20,000 kids in a stadium where it's just one constant drone, you know, and we, you know, it's fun. If we had to do every show that way, we'd have no voices left because you can't hear anything.
And it must be frustrating because here you are singing your souls out and no one can hear you because everything is so loud.
The kids react on shows like that. The kids react much more to just what you do visually as opposed to the music, because they can't hear either. I mean, it stands to reason that if they're screaming their brains out, and that's where the sound is coming from, I mean, they're not going to hear anything you're doing on stage. So we had a nice experience with being able to do just what we saw them do in the films, and when you shake your head, the whole audience goes crazy. And, you know, Joe
and you did study them, didn't you? You studied their films, so you had their motions and everything, because it's amazing. I mean, you naturally look like Paul McCartney. There's the resemblance.
A big help.
But Joe, as you get into the second act, you really start looking like John Lennon, too. It's just, I mean, it's a little frightening at times when you can connect the sound and the look that way. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're in town for a while, and I'm sure you will because the show will be successful, you must come back.
Blackstone Theater, too.
Yes, at the Blackstone Theater, and they're going to be there forever as long as people keep coming.
Right.
Debralee Scott has a new movie. The name of it?
Maui.
Maui will be released very shortly.